I think from a demo perspective, we'll spend more time on the SASE side of things, which is all a cloud-based management. Very simple. Well, all of the security capabilities, what we were showcasing earlier, will be available to be consumed as a service. One of the key design changes, what you will see in the UI, is the workflows, right? As we kind of design through the solution, we did a very close analysis through our user research teams, working very closely with some of our key customers. How do we keep that workflows very simple? While FortiGate offers a lot of bells and whistles from a cloud delivered perspective, how do we keep this simple while we offer a comprehensive security stack was a big challenge for us. I think we have done that absolutely well. But in this session, I think I'm going to pick it up where I left off. I think this is where we kind of stopped earlier. So when we talk about the universal SASE solution, what I'm going to do right now is we talked about what's right in the center, right? This is our cloud delivered security and networking stack. So this has our secure web gateway capabilities, which really talks about our URL filtering, what we were showcasing, our IPS capabilities, and our web antivirus capabilities, content filtering, including DNS filtering. So we continue to innovate in that security landscape space. I mean, we have very recently we have kind of introduced into the DNS filtering capabilities. How do we kind of stop across some of the advanced techniques like DNS tunneling, right? People leveraging doing this. If a random URL or a domain which pops up across the globe in a different continent, how do we kind of bring that into our URL database, right? It's a huge list because every net new minute, we have multiple hundreds of domains which pop up. So there's a lot of sophistication which happens through web crawlers, our FortiGuard threat intelligence team, who continue to score the net to kind of bring that intelligence from new domain based on who registered it, where is it registered, what does it really connect back to? Is this IP associated and connects back to what are the different domains? What is the rating of those domains, right? We rate this on a scale of 0 to 10 and give them all a scoring, right? So when we are talking about so much of comprehensive security capabilities, one of the key factor here is how do we keep the user experience great, right? How do we minimize the latency? So our approach is take the most lightweight security capabilities where we allow the customer to say, DNS filtering, I look at the domain and really quickly make a decision based on that. As we go into the stack, we can provide more comprehensive capabilities like sandboxing or deep SSL inspection, which we'll talk about in a minute. But this comprehensive stack is available across the globe with our global POP locations. And some of you might have seen this very recently. We have launched a partnership with Google Cloud to kind of get to the market faster to augment our existing Fortinet POP locations. So over the years, we have built a massive set of data centers across the globe. But really to help us augment that, we have taken a two-pronged approach where we partnered with Google Cloud to now serve more than 100 plus POP locations across the globe. So I think one of the questions earlier was around the connectivity from remote users. I think one aspect here is the unified agent. I'll talk a little bit about that. When we say unified agent, some of you might be familiar with what we refer to as FortiClient. This is a solution which we have had for many years. We started off with it as a standard endpoint protection agent, something which sits on your device, helps you do endpoint protection, also act as a VPN agent. But over time, what we have done is with the same agent, we have added multiple use cases to it, right? It's the same agent which can act as a ZTNA agent now. It's the same agent which gets the traffic from the endpoint and sends it to the SASE cloud. I think this is something which has been foundational to our approach. How do we keep the agent very light without making it bloated? And one of the other use case was many of our customers, as we spoke to them, as we kind of started off on our SASE solution, one of the biggest hurdle for them was the agent onboarding. I'm sure many of you will agree with that, right? I already have 8 agents sitting on my laptop. I don't need another one, right? So we have a huge install base of over 40 client customers. And for many of our new customers, like, can I do so many multiple use cases with the same agent? Even if they're not doing SASE, they start off with endpoint protection, but gives them that future proofing to move towards SASE later. And the second one for the remote user is very often when we talk about this, we live in a kind of a hybrid world where IT team has an ability to install agent on many devices. But what about companies with strong BOD policy, right? How about some of the partners who walk into the network? How do we secure that? I think that's where we talk about an agentless approach, going back to the pack file support, how we do it. And then if the remote user moves back into a micro branch or a branch location, we still have an ability to build an IPsec tunnel to outsource all of the security into the cloud, and we still get to do the comprehensive security right there. And this is where we'll do the demo as well on how the FortiExtender, what you see here, can connect back into our SASE solution. But where it gets interesting here is we have over 30,000 SD-WAN customers. For many of these customers, as they move towards SASE journey, one of the biggest questions is, how do I use my existing SD-WAN infrastructure and have that seamlessly integrate into the SASE network? So something which is very unique to us, as you...
Okay. While we get to the slide here, sure. I want to push on the user experience topic a little bit. You just mentioned that a lot of customers are hybrid. There are workloads in the cloud, there are workloads on-prem. So for those users that are running the FortiClient, they aren't sitting behind an SD-WAN appliance, and they need to get to workloads on-prem, how do we handle that user experience? Are those connections being terminated in the, I don't know if I'm calling it this right, but the FortiCloud to then tunnel back on-prem? Because I've seen with that methodology, the cloud-first approach is great, but as soon as you need to get back on-prem for something, you could be adding a lot of potentially unnecessary latency. I mean, how do you handle that?
That's a great question. I think that's a perfect segue to where I was going. I promise I didn't seed this question. So which is where I was going with the SD-WAN network right here. So for the remote users, when they're really going out to the internet traffic or any of the SaaS application, it works out great. You go to the cloud and then you're out, right? You do all of the security inspection here. But when it's going back to the corporate applications, right, the private applications, I think that's where we have a flexible options, which I'll talk about in a bit. But for our existing SD-WAN customers, think about the SD-WAN hubs where they have an overlay built. Our SASE POP really builds the point of presence really builds an IPsec tunnel right from there to the SD-WAN hub location. So what this allows is for the remote user, doesn't matter where he is going, whether he's going to the internet or to the corporate applications which you're talking about, he just comes to our SASE POP and we decide and do the security inspection and send it back to the right destination. So he just hops onto this and we have the ability to connect the SASE POP to multiple SD-WAN hub networks.
Okay.
So what Satish is talking about is something that we do very well with SASE, is that workflow, which is everybody else nails tunnels up from their data centers, okay? What we're doing, our workflow is my endpoint, and I'm just gonna focus on this remote user because in my opinion, it's the most important. SASE frameworks are about remote access. They're not about access to resources. It's access to everything. This endpoint connects to FortiSASE, gets its telemetry, gets its connection. We have a two-pronged approach to private access. Satish is talking about what we call secure SD-WAN, or actually secure private access SD-WAN. And here's the difference. Here's the nuance, which makes us very different and also gives us a tremendous performance and efficiency advantage, which is our FortiSASE POP, point of presence, connects as a spoke to the SD-WAN network, wherever it is.
I think maybe I'll switch to that slide. We can speak to that. I have a slide on that. So I think to your question, there are two different ways. I think the first one is the native ZTNA approach. which we're going to talk about in the demo. So for that remote user who is trying to go back to this corporate applications, so one option is where the user, after we do the validation of the device, the user identity checks, and based on the device posture, right? What OS version it's running, are there any vulnerabilities on the device? Is the firewall really turned on before he gets to access that application, right? All of those posture checks are being done. Then we allow a direct connection from that Forti client to just that specific application. This is what often referred to as per application access, just in time. But at the same time, after we do that, we do a continuous assessment of this, right? Has the posture of the device really changed over time? If it does, we have the ability to take a remediation based on that if the posture of the device does change. So that's one option to access from a remote user to kind of go to the application directly. And the second option is what we were talking about earlier, the SD-WAN. So this works out very well for the 30,000 plus SD-WAN customers who we have, where they essentially, if you look at it in this, there's a remote user who can go out to internet or any SaaS application or any private applications, right? Whether it's in the public cloud or their own private data center. So what we do, even before the remote user tries to access that, we build an IPsec tunnels right from our POPs to the SD-WAN hub locations. So this gives us the capability to kind of have the traffic flow no matter where the traffic is going, whether it's out to the internet or the private applications. And what's more interesting is, since we have that ability to do the intelligent steering right here on the POP, now between this multiple IPsec tunnels, which can connect to different existing hub networks, we can make decisions based on the network conditions, right? Packet loss, latency, jitter. We can decide, oh, this is the best link for you to get back to the corporate application. Satish is trying to access his Prelor application back in the corporate Fortinet HQ data center. There are 4 different ways to get there. I'm going to figure out what is the most optimal way for me to get there. I think this is where we kind of see a lot of traction. A lot of our existing SD-WAN customers gives them with a very few clicks, which we'll kind of showcase in the demo. They'll build that IPsec tunnels, and then the SASE kind of becomes a part of the existing SD-WAN fabric. Right? I think we talked about SD-WAN and SASE overall, but if there are a few things for you to kind of really take away from this session is the fact that we have the same underlying operating system across both SD-WAN and SASE really allows us to build that deep integration for our customers to take that phased approach to SASE. And then the third element here is the unified agent, right? Is the ability to easily onboard the end users. We have a huge customer who has onboarded over 100,000 customers over a matter of 6 weeks, right? So I think just speaks to the simplicity of onboarding users when you have an agent which can address multiple use cases. And then we have a strong global network with a good 2-pronged approach along with our existing Fortinet investments and partnership with Google. And then finally, I think it's very important not to forget the security efficacy. While we check off multiple different features and then capabilities, but in reality, when you see the real traffic come in, how strong security posture does it really deliver?
You mentioned hundreds of POPs and DCs around the globe. Do you have any type of way to control traffic policy to make sure traffic stays within a certain region or avoids other certain regions?
Yes. We have the ability to, that's a very good question. This often comes up in many of our customer conversations where data sovereignty, data residency concerns are there. So we have the ability to pick the right specific POP locations. I'm a customer in Europe. I get to pick these specific POPs. This is where my traffic goes and gets inspected. That capability is available.
And like, what about during outages between POPs or whatever? Can you make sure that traffic isn't, for failover, isn't routed through a region that it's not supposed to be routed through?
Yes, absolutely. So your endpoint will automatically detect if there's a problem with that connection and reconnect. If we're talking about the remote access use case, when we spin a FortiSASE instance, you choose the number of, you choose 4 POPs and then that endpoint is going to choose between those. So, and then of course, we could always do a one-off if you needed to have if you had a specific use case where you wanted to have specific traffic in a specific region all the time, we could do that as well.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Ready to go? Go.
I'm not sure I understand that, and it just could be that I need more coffee. If you're saying that the endpoints detect, they do the detection on the destination, and how would they detect an outage until the traffic stopped?
Correct. It's going to be a reconnection. We're not maintaining multiple states to multiple points of presence, but the endpoint is going to detect that change and reconnect. And that's a great. Does that answer?
I'm gonna still think about it.
Okay.
Tell me more.
Well, there's a. Okay. Yeah, we'll show. I'm going to move on, but what I do want to call out, because it actually speaks to why I wanted to come back to this slide, right? So it really SASE frameworks come down to what use case you're addressing. The first part of our session has talked about FortiManager and SD-WAN and our evolution with that and the innovation with that and how we've made that easier for both existing customers that need remote access to integrate to FortiSASE, and then also net new customers with SD-WAN that need that remote access. SASE gives them an excellent place to attach because you can start with the remote access. Meaning you don't have to forklift your environment, but you can do a VPN replacement with FortiSASE. Back to your use case, you're talking about what we would call secure private access, SD-WAN integration, or the secure internet access. An agent, right? I'm connected to the service, and then I get access to the internet, and I get access to resources. If my connection drops, it will reconnect. That's just one component, because I said we had a two-pronged approach to private access. It could be that your core critical applications are using ZTNA. In that case, ZTNA, and I love that you asked this question because now I can talk about the word telemetry, and I can say that this endpoint is registered to FortiSASE. It has a telemetry connection to the FortiSASE service, which means it can exercise Zero Trust network access rules, which is the second part of that two-pronged approach, that granular access, right? So if the POP were to go down, the traffic would still flow because our ZTNA, and I'm going to come into another diagram. I'm still going to come back to that one, but ours, it's like I knew you asked the question because our ZTNA basically, just to show you the workflow, is not cloud native unless you want it to be. So we give you the flexibility to point all your traffic to make it cloud native, but distinctly you don't have to because we feel like we should let the endpoint choose its own, best route for that ZTNA. The difference is, and this is key, and I'm going to go back to that other slide. The difference between the two types of private access, one is granular, achieves a higher level of zero trust. Both of them have dynamic posture assessment, but this one is granular. This one is the top one. The Zero Trust Network Access is granular on demand per session per user. So you can layer your own authentication if you want. Natively, you can drop whatever IDP you want into FortiSASE, or you can use our IDP solution as an IDP proxy for multiple remote users and remote user types. But this is really, and I intentionally didn't draw the secure private access because we don't need to, because that happens naturally. When that endpoint is connected, it goes out to the internet and it gets to the resources. And the difference is when this endpoint goes to a branch, if you want it to behave just like this all the time, it can. If you want it to act like it's on the network, it can. So if this person right here is a road warrior, never goes to the office. So when he goes,
He knows where it is.
When he goes, he doesn't want to have to deal with all of that stuff. He just wants it to work. So what do we do for him, right? When he goes to the office, FortiClient says, you know what? That guy's not in the office, don't connect, right? And what's his other option? Because this is that other connection method. His other option at home, because he says, you know what? I don't even want a client. Right? So we send him this. Now this is a 200F. This is 200F 40 extender. Okay. We have lots of models. This is designed to be a LAN extension. Okay. Ethernet cable going to a device. So this is just a layer 2 network that's extended from FortiSASE. Okay. Ethernet cable here is the WAN port. Very simple. I set this up in about 10 minutes last night at my house for today. And I brought it here and plugged it in. And we could browse traffic on this endpoint. So SASE frameworks, as I said, are based in remote access, right? But we don't force you to use a certain type of remote access. What you're looking at is the agent, because that gives you the most capability, right? That gives you the best user experience. You get that telemetry, you get the VPN connection. Here's another distinction. We provide anti-malware, AV, endpoint protection capabilities in our unified client. That's a distinct difference. So day one, you get these capabilities. You can turn them off if you want. We also provide sandboxing capabilities. Okay. Also a very nice feature because our sandbox allows you to make real-time decisions on the endpoint. We also do vulnerability scanning. Okay. So this is a powerful thing. So when we talked about, to your question about secure web gateway, of course we support that. That's actually the core component of most of our competing solutions. The difference is we have a piece of hardware that does the same exact thing, uses the same OS and the same FortiGuard security, and orchestrated and automated just like our SD-WAN, right? We have an agent. We're soon to have access points that will allow you to do the same thing. And we can support the secure web gateway use case. And I say that, and we can, because that's the best way to do VPN replacement, right? Is do it with a proxy. But with us, we would push you towards achieving that zero trust.
I have a question about
Sure. And I'm going to jump into an interface here. Sure. Go ahead.
Yeah. So while you're doing that, you're kind of drawing a distinction in your product, if I understand it correctly, between SD-WAN features and SASE features. Mm-hmm. Is there a licensing difference that you're talking about as well associated with that? So if I want to get to that most granular capability for the user flows, is that a licensing difference between that and not the most granular?
No, you actually get, and that's the beauty of our solution. You get it. You get everything in the FortiGate from a FortiGuard perspective. You get all of the security. You get the robust routing capabilities. You get the user authentication capabilities. You get the universal ZTNA application gateway. You get the SD-WAN capabilities. That there's no additional licensing there for the edge device or for the device that sits in the data center. That's the the SD-WAN hub. That's the demarcation point. From the standpoint of the SASE side, it's just the cost of the user license, and then essentially, obviously, we're going to license the edge. And we're going to license the connection coming into the SD-WAN environment that exists. Makes sense? So there's a single user license. You get the complete FortiSASE solution and all of the components, and then you add on the pieces where you would need them, right? From that standpoint.
Yeah, so just to repeat that back, so I think I'm tracking everything you're saying. I understand the parts that get licensed, but there's no difference in the licensing level, if you will, to go from basic routing, if you will, to ZTNA.
No, we've never done that. No, it's okay. You buy it, you choose the security package that you want, and we have a couple of different levels there, but that's separate from the ZTNA capability, and all of that is included in one box, no matter what size and things like that. So.